and Chairman and Councilman and Councilwoman, thank you so much for inviting us today. My name is Raed Jarrar. I am the Advocacy Director with Democracy for the Arab World Now, which is the organization that was founded by the late Jamal Khashoggi. I am a proud resident of Washington, D.C., a homeowner in Ward 1. I've lived in D.C. Since 2006. And I'm very happy to see that Councilwoman Pinto introduced this bill, a very important bill to designate the street outside the Saudi embassy in Washington, D.C. as the Jamal Khashoggi Way. For me, I care about this as a resident of D.C. I also care about it because Jamal Khashoggi was the founder of the organization where I work now. Jamal Khashoggi was a journalist who worked with the Washington Post. He also lived in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. He founded Democracy for the Arab World Now in June 2018, just 4 months before he was murdered by agents of the Saudi government in the Saudi consulate in Turkey. So changing the name of the street is extremely important to me. It's extremely important to many of my community members here in DC because it sends a clear message that we will not forget about Jamal Khashoggi. We will continue to advocate for justice and accountability for him. And we want everyone who works at the Saudi embassy to see his name on that street sign every morning when they're going to work. We want everyone who is visiting that embassy to remember what the Saudi government did to Jamal Khashoggi and to realize that Jamal Khashoggi's legacy will live on. I joined almost 10,000 of my fellow DC and DMV residents last year in signing a petition to the DC Council. I included a copy of my petition in my written testimony that I submitted to the record yesterday. The petition calls on the DC Council to change the name of the street. Obviously, having 10,000 people sign the petition is a very clear message that this is an important issue, not just for us who work for the organization who was founded by Jamal Khashoggi, not just for us who know Jamal Khashoggi as a friend and a colleague, but for us as DC residents who care about peace and justice and accountability. I also submitted a letter on the record as a part of my testimony that was sent to the council yesterday. The letter was signed by 24 international and local organizations calling on the DC Council to change the name of the street. These organizations include my own organization, Democracy for the Arab World Now. They include Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Committee to Protect Journalists, PEN America, Reporters Without Borders, Article 19, Code Pink, Council for American Islamic Relations, CAIR, the Washington Baltimore News Guild, Empower DC, One DC, One Common Unity, and the list goes on and on and on, including the Foggy Bottom Citizens organization where this name change is happening. So I think we have an overwhelming majority of citizens, of organizations, and of course, we're very thankful to Councilwoman Pinto for introducing this resolution in her Ward 2. Thank you, Chairman Mendelson, and I do want to end my remarks by asking everyone on the council to vote yes and expedite the passing of this important designation so that we can actually see the street sign up soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Mr. McCarron.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, council members, fellow citizens. I'm William C. McCarron. I'm Executive Director of the National Press Club. The Press Club is the world's leading professional organization for journalists. It was formed in Washington, D.C. in 1908 and has been in operation here ever since. We have nearly 3,000 members, including journalists from every major news organization. And in non-COVID times, we employ more than 100 persons on a full-time basis. The Press Club built the National Press Building in 1926. It stands as an important symbol of press freedom in the capital city. The club has long been an outspoken advocate for journalists in trouble and press freedom overall. This includes our Press Freedom Award given annually to journalists such as Maria Ressa, Jason Rezaian, and Austin Tice. I support the proposal, Bill 2422, to name the street in question Jamal Khashoggi Way, and thanks to Councilmember Pinto for introducing the bill. Mr. Khashoggi was the 2018 recipient of the National Press Club's John Aubuchon Award for Press Freedom. The club recognized Mr. Khashoggi in the year of his death for the purpose of keeping a light on his case in the hope that there would ultimately be justice for him. We find this proposed action, Bill 2422, to be fulfilling a similar purpose. We think this sends the right signal at the right time. The recent announcement by the Nobel Committee that its famous Peace Prize will be given to 2 journalists underscores both the significance and the value of journalists and journalism in a democratic society, and the risks journalists face to do their jobs to help create an informed citizenry. Journalism and truth are under assault as never before by repressive governments around the world. Mr. Khashoggi was murdered because of what he had written and what he might write in the future. This murder was planned, financed, carried out, and covered up by the government of Saudi Arabia, as detailed in a report made public by the US government in February 2021. The Saudi government, which occupies a significant and prominent embassy here in Washington, should be reminded every day that the world knows what they did and why and how, and that such actions are intolerable and will not be forgotten. Changing the name of the street in question will be a constant reminder to the embassy staff and all people who visit them that residents of the District of Columbia want justice for Jamal. We will not forget the ruthless crime planned and carried out and covered up by the Saudi government. This action will send a strong signal to the diplomatic community in DC. It will send a strong message across our city and across the country and indeed around the world. Those who love freedom and free press will take pictures of the street sign and share them on social media. Millions of people will use this information to help understand what America and its capital city stand for: freedom and democracy, free expression, and a free press. These are powerful and valuable symbols to a world eager to understand what America stands for now. And a reminder, should there be any question, that the Star-Spangled Banner still waves over the land of the free. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Nihad Awad.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Nihad Awad. I am a friend of the late Jamal Khashoggi. I knew him for 25 years. I also serve as the National Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, based here in Washington, D.C., with 25 offices nationwide. Thank you very much for holding this very important hearing. I urge you to support Bill 2422, the Jamal Khashoggi Way Designation Act of 2021, which would symbolically honor the memory and legacy of Washington Post columnist, free speech champion, and democracy activist Jamal Khashoggi by designating a portion of the street in front of the Saudi embassy as Jamal Khashoggi Way. I personally commend Councilmember Brooke Pinto and other council members who sponsored and co-sponsored this bill, and I urge them all to vote yes for it. When Jamal Khashoggi moved back to Washington, D.C. in 2017, I watched him. I watched him plant the seeds of what would be his legacy organization, Democracy for the Arab World Now, DAWN, a nonprofit organization that promotes democracy, the rule of law, and human rights for all people of the Middle East and North Africa. Today, I serve as a board member of DAWN. I personally know that Jamal Khashoggi loved Washington, D.C. and its people. For years, he worked as an advisor to the Saudi embassy on New Hampshire Avenue, and also as a journalist for the Washington Post. That's why he chose Washington, D.C. as the city in which he wanted to establish Dawn's headquarters. From D.C., he believed that he could safely and securely promote the values of democracy and freedom of the press in the Middle East. Mr. Chairman, like so many, I was shocked and horrified by the brutal murder of my friend and the dismemberment of him by agents of the Saudi government in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. This planned assassination of a DC journalist was orchestrated by Saudi officials. No one should ever have to suffer such a vicious murder, much less at the hands of their own government. Yet Mr. Khashoggi was murdered by agents of the Saudi government for being an outspoken pro-democracy activist who believed in government transparency and accountability, and as well as the fundamental human rights and freedom for all people, no matter in which country they live in. Although 3 years have passed, Mr. Chairman, since his murder, we know that Jamal Khashoggi's justice has not been done, and we have not forgotten him, and we have not forgotten the crimes of Saudi Arabia. While the US government has acknowledged this horrendous crime, it has failed to take any appropriate action to hold the perpetrators to account. And that's why we continue to demand justice for Jamal Khashoggi. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman and Council members, by adopting the Jamal Khashoggi Way Designation Act of 2021, the city of Washington, D.C. will be sending a powerful message to the world that Washington, D.C. honors the memory of Jamal Khashoggi forever. Those who value freedom of the press and the right of journalists to speak and write freely will owe you a great debt of gratitude should you adopt Bill 2422 and memorialize Jamal Khashoggi's name. And finally, they try to silence him. They try to quiet him. But today, the DC City Council is reviving his name and renewing its commitment to free press by protecting and memorializing the legacy and name of Jamal Khashoggi. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sarah Whitson.
Thank you, Council Chair, and thank you, dear esteemed Washington, D.C. Council members. Thank you for convening this hearing today to discuss this bill, the Jamal Khashoggi Way Designation Act, which would designate the 600 block of New Hampshire Avenue Northwest as Jamal Khashoggi Way. My name is Sarah Leah Whitson, and I am the Executive Director of Democracy for the Arab World Now, the organization which Jamal Khashoggi founded and for whom this piece of legislation is dedicated. This legislation is personally important to me. Jamal was my friend and an ally for our human rights work for nearly 20 years. On October 2nd, 2018, Jamal Khashoggi was suffocated and dismembered by a team of agents of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. While the Saudi government has yet to release the full details of this crime, including where they have hidden Jamal Khashoggi's remains, we know that the Saudi agents acted on the directions of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. We also know that the Saudi ambassador here in Washington at the time played a role in luring Jamal to travel to Istanbul, where they could carry out their ugly plan to murder him. It is our duty not only to honor Jamal's sacrifice and legacy, but to ensure some measure of truth and accountability for this crime, for which the key perpetrator remains unpunished. That's why I'm advocating that you approve the passage of this bill and support us in this effort. Granting the designation of this street as Khashoggi Way will provide a daily and constant reminder of Jamal Khashoggi, his struggle for democracy, and the brutality of the Saudi government and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Such a designation will be a millstone for the Saudi government and a warning to tyrants everywhere that there will be some modicum of accountability for their abuses. Naming Jamal Khashoggi Way will show Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and the other brutal autocrats that we do not fear them and we will not be bought by them. The District of Columbia will have done its part to stand in solidarity with Khashoggi, with journalists and activists who are still attacked the world over, and to say, not on our turf. This is our district, and we will not stand for such heinous crimes. My organization, Dawn, continues the work of our founder to amplify the voices of democracy activists from the Middle East and to stand up to brutal autocrats in the Middle East and North Africa. Just as Jamal did, we stand with political prisoners and dissident exiles in their struggle for freedom and democracy. Mohammed bin Salman may have thought that in murdering Jamal, he would extinguish his voice. Not so. Jamal has become more famous in death, and his voice echoes through the region. Our organization is making sure of that. The Saudi government has poured millions into lobbying efforts, which my organization, Dawn, has highlighted in our lobbyist hall of shame, to whitewash their many atrocities and to try to make the world forget about Jamal Khashoggi and his work. We are here today to say that we haven't forgotten, we will not forget, and we will make sure that those responsible are forced to reckon with their crimes every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whitson. I don't believe we have a copy of your statement. If you would provide that, please.
We will.
Thank you. Ms. Benjamin?
Unmute.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me this. Hello?
Good morning. We can hear
Good
you.
morning. My name is Medea Benjamin. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm a longtime resident of Washington, D.C. in Ward 6, the author of a book on Saudi Arabia and the founder of a women-led peace group called Code Pink. Our organization has been a supporter of Saudi dissidents for decades and an admirer of Jamal Khashoggi. That's why I want to express my sincere gratitude to you, Chairman Mendelson, to Councilwoman Brooke Pinto for introducing this bill, and the other co-sponsors of this act. Once we learned about Khashoggi's disappearance on October 2nd, 2018, Code Pink, along with other human rights and peace groups, began organizing regular vigils outside the Saudi embassy to demand answers and to express our outrage. We also organized many protests at the White House to condemn our government's cozy relationship with the Saudi regime. President Trump at the time bragged about his robust weapons sales to the Saudis, weapons that were used to perpetrate a catastrophic war in Yemen. And he bragged about having rehabilitated Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS, who was shunned by global leaders after Khashoggi's murder. Unfortunately, although candidate Biden said that the Crown Prince should be treated as a pariah, President Biden, once in office, failed to do so even after US intelligence reports proved MBS's central role in this unforgivable crime. While we continue to push our government to recalibrate its relations with the repressive Saudi regime, it is so inspiring to see the DC City Council raising its voice and taking a principled stand. In one of his Washington Post columns, Khashoggi wrote, "I have left my home, my family, my job, and I'm raising my voice. To do otherwise would betray those who languish in prison. We Saudis deserve better," he said. By naming the street in front of the Saudi embassy after Jamal Khashoggi, the great city of Washington, D.C. not only honors Khashoggi's legacy, but send a message to the Saudi rulers that we, like Khashoggi, believe that the Saudi people deserve better. We are sending a loud and clear message that Washington, D.C. stands against brutal dictators and stands up for journalists, for press freedom, for government accountability, and for basic human decency. Thank you for raising your voices and echoing the powerful voice of this truth teller and democracy activist. Long live Jamal Khashoggi.
Thank you, Ms. Benjamin. Agnes Callamard? I thought I saw her here. Then, and Hatice Sengiz, I don't see her. So I'll go to David Barrows. Mr. Barrows.
Hello.
Ms. Callamard,
Yes.
why don't you begin?
Thank you very much. Distinguished committee, my name is Agnes Callamard. I was United Nations Special Rapporteur for extrajudicial summary or arbitrary killing from 2016 to 2021. In that capacity, I led an investigation into the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, which concluded that Mr. Khashoggi had been extrajudicially killed by the state of Saudi Arabia, his body dismembered and disappeared, and that this state killing had been planned and premeditated. To date, those who ordered or instigated Jamal's killings have not been brought to justice, including the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Distinguished committee, justice cannot be switched off. It has to be served. And if we cannot satisfy justice today, we keep the light on, because we cannot let darkness surround us all, for we will fall under its shadow. Because confronted with the grotesque violence of his assailant, we do not turn our back on that which cannot be tolerated, because no one should get away with murder. We remember, because no country should be able to buy their way out of accountability, no matter their influence and strategic relevance, no matter the nature of their friendship. We demand, because justice for Jamal Khashoggi is justice for many others, we shine the light. Distinguished committee, remembering Jamal means pushing political actors and institutions around the world out of their self-imposed paralysis. Justice for Mr. Khashoggi means exposing the killers and all those that support, embolden or protect them and sustain a regime of impunity the world over. Prevention and protection of journalists anywhere in the world is part of our action of memory for Jamal. Remembering Jamal, we also remember and cry for far too many others executed for their critical reporting and independence of mind. Dear committee, by changing the name of the street outside the Saudi embassy to Jamal Khashoggi Way, you will insist that no one, not even as influential a state as Saudi Arabia, can get away with scrutiny. With the Jamal Khashoggi Way, you will raise awareness about the many dangers confronted by those like Jamal who dare stand up to those wanting complete obedience and silence. By adopting the Jamal Khashoggi Way, you will contribute to delivering justice for Jamal Khashoggi. At times, it may feel as if justice for Jamal and many others like him hangs by a thread, but that is the very thread from which human rights and freedom of the press are woven, and democratic evolution and revolutions are won. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Callamard. David Barrows.